Bonjour, bienvenue à notre rendez-vous quotidien pour la presse en ligne et en direct sur EBS. Nous sommes aujourd'hui le lundi 18 janvier. This week being a plenary week in the European Parliament, the college meeting will take place tomorrow afternoon. The college will discuss the following points. Ahead of Thursday's video conference of the members of the European Council, the College will adopt a communication on the situation regarding COVID-19 in Europe. And furthermore, commissioners will also adopt a communication on the European economic and financial system, fostering openness, strength, and resilience. On this second subject, we will offer you a technical briefing under embargo tomorrow afternoon at 2 p.m. on this, and further press arrangements will be communicated to you later. Now, I would like to pass the floor to Vivian, who has good news on cohesion policy.
Good afternoon. The European Commission has approved a project worth of 60 million euros from the Cohesion Fund for Portugal. This will allow to convert an old railway line into a route for electric buses connecting Coimbra with its neighboring municipalities. This new line will make it easier for people to travel. It will reduce congestion and traffic-related noise, as well as carbon and greenhouse gas emissions. And as usual, you will find more information on our EU-funded investments on the open data platform, as well as in today's daily news. Thank you. Short and crisp.
Exactly. Merci Viviane. Avant de prendre vos questions, j'aimerais vous rappeler les vidéoconférences de la journée. Les ministres des Affaires européennes se réunissent ce matin en vidéoconférence informelle pour discuter les priorités de la nouvelle présidence portugaise du Conseil, les préparations pour la conférence sur le futur de l'Europe et la coordination de politique nationale sur la Covid-19, et notamment la vaccination en préparation de la vidéoconférence des dirigeants de ce jeudi. Le vice-président Šefčovič représente la Commission lors de cette réunion et il participera aussi à la conférence de presse qui est prévue à 13h. Ensuite, l'Eurogroupe se réunit cet après-midi. La Commission sera représentée par le vice-président exécutif Valdis Dombrovskis et le commissaire Gentiloni. La réunion discutera des progrès dans la préparation des plans pour la reprise et la résilience, l'évolution des déséquilibres macroéconomiques dans la zone euro et le futur des relations avec les États-Unis en matière financière et monétaire. Le commissaire Gentiloni participera à la conférence de presse qui aura lieu à la fin de la réunion et nous vous invitons donc à lui adresser vos questions sur ces sujets. Et avec ceci, nous pouvons passer à vos questions. Et je vois que nous avons une question de Cataline, je n'ose pas prononcer son nom de famille, Soldegui. Cataline, you have the floor.
Hello, Eric. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and Happy New Year at first to you all. My question is on Minority Safe Pack. Why has the European Commission rejected the Minority Safe Pack initiative? This citizens' initiative has been supported by more than 1 million signatures by European citizens, 3/4 of European Parliament, almost 600 MEPs, and several national parliaments, including the German Bundestag, supported the initiative. And previously, the European Court of Justice also ruled that measures could be adopted on this subject. So why is the European Commission not initiating legislation when protection of the rights of minorities, linguistics and cultural diversity is a fundamental value of the Union in accordance with Article 2? And my second question on defending on minority rights, 6 months after the Black Lives Matter movement, the Commission has drawn up an anti-racism action plan, and the Commission already has a gender strategy. So why cannot the Commission have a strategy on European ethnic minorities? Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Cataline. And I pass the floor to Christian.
Yes, hello. Thank you for your question, Cataline, and also Happy New Year. let me say the following. The College agreed last week, indeed, on the Commission reply to the European Citizens Initiative Minority Safe Pack, which is actually the 5th successful initiative supported by over 1 million citizens across the EU. The reply carefully assesses each of the 9 individual proposals, setting out how existing and recently adopted EU legislation supports the different aspects of this initiative. So let me make clear that the College did, of course, not reject the Citizens' Initiative, but we agreed that the full implementation of legislation and policies already in place provide a powerful toolbox to support the initiative's goals, which are indeed very important. I'll answer your I think your 2 questions in one, but I'll give you a number of elements to explain a little bit in more detail our position, which you will also find if you read the initiative or the response to the initiative itself. So first of all, in more general terms on European citizens' initiatives, as I mentioned, we had already 5 successful citizens' initiatives in the meantime, and to 2 of them, the Commission only quite recently actually answered with also with legislative proposals, for instance on ban glyphosate and toxic pesticides, where the new regulation was formally adopted in June last year and will become applicable in March this year. And in the Right to Water initiative, where the Commission proposed a revision of the Drinking Water Directive, which actually just entered into force a few days ago on the 12th of January. And then there's another initiative, Stop Vivisection, where the Commission responded with other actions, with non-legislative actions, and the so-called One of Us initiatives, where the Commission did not submit a legislative proposal, given that we considered that the EU framework in place is adequate. So more concretely on this initiative now, let's not forget that the initiative goes back to the year 2013. So it's quite a few years ago that this initiative was launched and the different proposals were put on the table. And of course, in the meantime, time didn't stop. So there was a lot ongoing on the European level in terms of initiatives that were also supporting, if I may say, the spirit of a lot of these proposals that were put in there. And I would just like to give you a few examples to make it a bit concrete. So, for instance, the initiative is calling for a Council recommendation to further protect and promote cultural and linguistic diversity. So, in the last few years, we had 3 Council recommendations, one in 2018, one in 2019, and one in 2020, that addressed exactly such issues of more cultural and linguistic diversity. Or a second example that I would like to give to you is this Center for Linguistic Diversity. If you look a bit closer, you will see that there is already a Council of Europe, European Center for Modern Languages, for which the Commission provides also financial support. So you also have to look into issues like avoiding duplication of efforts and saving resources. And the third and last example that I would like to give is about the issue of copyright, which was mentioned, which I think is very well known to most journalists following this year from the heated debates in the last years about it. And as you know, we had quite some changes in copyright legislation very recently that were now agreed. So also here, time has moved on in a sense. But this does not mean that we do not support a lot of the important goals of these initiatives, and that we will continue monitoring how these different measures that are in place are being implemented by the member states. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. I believe there are other questions on this issue. I would ask all the colleagues who have raised their hands who are not going to ask a question on this to unraise your hands, please. And I give the floor to Tibor.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Tibor, go ahead.
Yeah. The Commission announced last December that from this year, there will be an annual report on the implementation of the Charter of the Fundamental Rights, which will look into how member states apply the Charter in a selected thematic area. My question is if there is already a plan which thematic areas will be covered, and if the situation of national minorities, to come back to this topic, will be examined independent of other minorities due to their special problems. Thank you.
Christian.
Yes, thank you for your question, Tibor. Indeed, that is correct. It was announced in our fundamental rights strategies that we would come forward with such thematic reports on fundamental rights, and I can actually confirm already that the rights of minorities will indeed be covered in one of these forthcoming reports. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other questions for Christian today? Samuel.
Oui, bonjour. La Confédération européenne des syndicats a publié une petite étude ce matin qui tente à démontrer que les inégalités de salaire entre les hommes et les femmes continuent à être très importantes en Europe. Et je me demandais si on avait des nouvelles sur la présentation des mesures qui étaient annoncées peut-être d'une prochaine directive sur la transparence des salaires. J'ai l'impression que ça avait été prévu dans les 100 premiers jours du mandat de Mme von der Leyen. Et je voulais savoir s'il y avait des raisons pour ce retard.
Merci. Christian.
Oui, bonjour Samuel. Oui, c'est correct. C'est un important projet que nous préparons et la Commission reste fermement. Nous avons le soutien pour cette proposition concernant le gender pay gap et binding pay transparency measures. Et nous travaillons sur ces sujets très intensivement, mais la qualité est plus importante que la rapidité dans ce cas. Et pour ça, juste tout ce que je peux dire à ce moment est que cette proposition va venir dans les prochains mois.
Merci beaucoup, Christian. Y a-t-il d'autres questions pour Christian aujourd'hui? Oliver. Nicolas, c'est pour Christian? Non plus.
Oui, hello.
Oui, c'est pour Christian.
Bonjour.
État de droit?
Je ne sais pas si c'est exactement pour Christian, non. C'est plutôt sur la protection des investissements étrangers, donc je ne suis pas sûr que ce soit pour Christian.
Non, je ne pense pas a priori.
Je passe mon tour.
D'accord. Catherine, rule of law question for Christian.
Eric, it's for Christian.
Go ahead.
Can I continue?
If it's for Christian, go ahead.
Okay. It's not for Christian. So.
Sorry,
no? Okay.
Then you were not first in the queue. Apologies. And we have I can hear myself in your mic, in your loudspeakers. So I go back to Oliver. Oliver, you have the floor.
Hi, hello. Yeah, on the virus, on traveling and so forth. Can you tell us which members of the Commission College took part in the trip to Portugal? Who of them had contact with the Portuguese finance minister? I would assume all of them, because I guess they were all in a conference room together. The one who actually tested positive the day after the travel. Thirdly, I think Belgian law requires them to go into a quarantine for 14 days. Now, can you confirm how they intend to deal with quarantine and testing requirements? And finally, on a more political level, in light of this confirmed infection of the Portuguese minister during this meeting and so forth. Do you still think it was a wise choice for almost half of the Commission College to travel to Lisbon in person instead of doing that via a remotely organized conference? Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver. So to answer your questions, the delegation which traveled to Lisbon comprised the president, as you know, the 3 executive vice presidents, the High Representative Vice President Mr. Borrell, Vice President Skinas, Vice President Šefčovič, and Commissioners Ferreira and Schmidt. So we are far away from half of the college, as you say. It is rather 1/3 of the college that traveled. The commissioners that are considered contact persons, according to the way the meetings were held and the analysis done both by the Portuguese authorities and ourselves, are the 3 which we have mentioned these last days. So Executive Vice President Mrs. Vestager, Executive Vice President Mr. Dombrovskis, and Commissioner Ferreira. And they are in self-isolation. They will be tested according to the Belgian rules as they currently stand on the 7th day after coming back. And then the quarantine, sorry, I said self-isolation, they are in quarantine, I understand we are supposed to say. And then it will depend obviously on the result of the test. As to whether it was a good idea in hindsight to go on the mission or not, well, what I can say is that, of course, these decisions are not taken lightly. The president reflected on this, but it is considered an essential mission because it is the launch of an extremely important presidency. There are many, many files which need to be carried forward by the Portuguese presidency, and it was felt important to be able to hold in-person discussions on these different political files. You're not without knowing that here in Brussels there are differences. For example, there are VTCs, video conferences, sorry, I should say, of leaders. There will be one this week, but on certain other files, leaders do meet in Brussels. So it depends on the importance of the event. So, of course, we try to take all the precautions that are necessary, but yes, the meeting was considered sufficiently essential for this reduced delegation to travel to Lisbon. Are there other questions on this issue? Please only keep your hand raised if it is on the mission to Lisbon. Mose, you have a question on this.
But more importantly, I think, on the virus and the vaccination process now, if I may. Okay, especially as you said in the announcement that the issue of vaccination will be discussed this week, today at the European Affairs Ministers meeting, and also later by the Council. So my question would be, first, one question, whether the distribution and allocation of the vaccine doses by member states, we know that it's supposed to be on the basis of pro rata, on the numbers of the population member states, but we also know that there are different, let's say, vaccination reluctances in the member states. In Italy, I think perhaps only 60%, no, 40% are against vaccination. In France, up to 60 even, according to reports in the media. I wonder if this somehow will influence or modify the allocation of the vaccine doses to member states. And another follow-up question is, which I've tried to figure out also directly. Do you hear me?
Yes, yes, we hear you. Yes, we hear you.
Yeah, thank you. From European Vaccines Agency, EMA, without success. That is what is the recommendation for the two different vaccinations to be taken with the Pfizer vaccine? According to the website, it should be at least 21 days between the first and the second shot, but it seems not to be clear how long that interval can be. And I think very important to know, I mean, how long can we wait with taking the second shot? Because in some countries, for example, in Sweden, my own home country, I hear that, okay, they can wait for weeks. But I don't think that is what Pfizer itself has recommended. So what does the Commission know about this very important issue? Thank you.
Thank you, Mose. These are questions, both questions are for Stefan. I pass him the floor.
Hello, Mose. Good afternoon. On the first question with regard to the distribution of the vaccines, you know, indeed, as you stressed yourself, that these vaccines are distributed on the basis of the pro rata distribution key. We look at the population. That's always the starting point for the distribution of all these vaccines. Of course, member states, as we have explained already in the press room as well, have the possibility to discuss between themselves to possibly agree on a redistribution of doses on the basis of needs, new needs that member states may have. Some member states may wish less of a certain vaccine, other member states may wish more of a certain vaccine. So in the context of such these discussions, it is possible to agree on a redistribution which goes beyond the starting point, which is the pro rata distribution. That's the first point. On the second point, with regards to EMA and the number of days between the two doses of Pfizer, you are right to say that EMA is the organization that is following this. So they are the people that can give you the right scientific advice on this. Maybe, so I definitely refer you to them. What I could say, however, is that the use of the vaccines has to happen in line with the product information of the vaccine, that the product, that the developer, that the company has not provided any evidence regarding extending the administration of the second dose, which would lead to immunization of the patient or the person who has been administered the vaccine. So we basically have to look at the scientific evidence which is there. But as far as this scientific evidence is concerned, EMA is obviously much better qualified than me to give you this information. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's stick to the issue of vaccines. Thomas.
Yes, it's up to me. Well, it's not vaccines, but it is on the journey to Portugal, which was the subject that we would stick to before this.
No, but it's the same. It's the same issue for me. It's the same issue for me.
Okay, great. So on the subject, if this journey was essential, I can imagine that you think it was essential. But on Thursday, there was apparently another essential meeting of commissioners in Brussels. A lot of commissioners were in their home countries just before that. Tomorrow, we will have yet another essential meeting of the commissioners in Brussels again. I think there are a lot of companies in Europe who are not doing these kind of meetings at the moment and who are not judging these meetings essential. Can you explain why all these meetings are still going on within the European Commission?
Well, clearly because the business that the college has in managing the crisis and continuing the work on its program, on its priorities, is extremely important. And as you know, this has been going on now for quite some time. These meetings have been taking place without any adverse effects for the very simple reason that the college is taking all the necessary protective measures and social distancing measures in order for those meetings to take place in safe conditions. It is only a very small minority of meetings in the Commission that are taking place physically. Essentially, the meeting of the College of Commissioners and also the meeting of heads of cabinet, but also in a very streamlined format. Most of the other activities of the Commission are taking place remotely. And I think that to consider that the meeting of the College of Commissioners is essential goes without saying. It is absolutely essential for commissioners to be able to discuss the files. They do so in person, except those who, for one reason or another, are in quarantine or self-isolation, who take place remotely. David, I believe your question is on the same subject.
Thanks very much, Eric. Not to belabor the point here, but if you could perhaps comment on the fact that this is not just a question of the Commission assessing that this was essential business, but that it was essential business and essential travel to a member state that is experiencing one of the worst COVID situations at the moment. And I wonder if in particular you can talk to us about two things. One is that we understand from the cabinet of Vice President Vestager that she's in self-isolation because she was sitting at dinner with the Portuguese finance minister. And you had assured us that all the social distancing measures would be taken before this trip. And the question is whether the Commission is sufficiently adapting, even in the case of essential business, its working methods. Was a dinner, in fact, essential to be sitting, eating, prolonging the business, as opposed to getting the meetings done as quickly and with as much social distancing as possible? And then beyond this question, of course, it's about for the message to the citizens of Europe about whether, in fact, the Commission is making the kinds of sacrifices that individual citizens are also being asked to make, knowing that the business of the Commission is essential, but the launch of the presidency is not the business of the presidency. And finally, if you could just talk to us about what plans, if any, are in place for vaccinating, if this kind of travel is going to continue. Does the Commission have a plan to vaccinate the president, the vice presidents, and the full college so that they can continue this business without repeated risks and, again, disruptions that come from then having to self-isolate? Because some of us, of course, had asked you about this, sensing it was inevitable that an incident like this would occur. Thanks so much.
Wow, well, that was a mouthful. It requires a lot of attention to follow, but thank you, first of all, for your concern for the health of commissioners. Trust me, I heard you pronounce the word privilege. I find it quite amazing to believe that us traveling to Lisbon for a day of meetings from basically 8 o'clock in the morning until 1 o'clock at night is a privilege. And that the people who have to go to work every day, as many people do on the front line, to man shops or do all the other things that people are doing, are privileged because they get to go to work. The fact is that it was considered important to have one-on-one discussions with the ministers who will be running the presidency in a period that is absolutely essential. Let me remind you, for example, that we are trying to ensure that the next generation EU and MFF can start their operations as quickly as possible. We need to ensure that we can continue to work together on all the health-related files, and so on, and so on. In terms of the precautions taken, well, obviously, the college took all the precautions that it could. Then, of course, once we are in Portugal, we are in the hands of the Portuguese presidency, who also took all the precautions that they could. But nevertheless, in view of the circumstances, it was considered that these three members of the college would be considered contact persons. Then, in terms of the vaccination of commissioners, I believe we have already answered that question. We will be implementing the policy in line with Belgian rules, and this is currently being assessed and developed, so we will come back to you on that at a later point in time. Other questions on this? Jack.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead, Jack.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Jack.
Thank you. So that was an interesting comment about privilege, because normally public servants do sort of feel it's a privilege to serve their populations. But my question is, are we going to stop this kind of travel now, considering it's causing, so much issues with people having to quarantine and stuff when they get back?
Thank you. The comment on the privilege was not about serving the European people, which is definitely a very, very big privilege, which we feel every day. It was about the fact of going on mission to Lisbon to hold meetings, only that very specific point. On trips, I think it's very clear that we take decisions on a case-by-case basis, depending on the circumstances and the contacts with our partners. Let me remind you that in this case, we went to Lisbon at the invitation of the Portuguese presidency, who maintained the invitation. And therefore, we will have to see what are the next meetings that are up on the agenda and under which circumstances they take place and whether it will be considered essential that they take place or not. I think that the president felt that these meetings were extremely helpful. So did the other members of the college, and that they will therefore play a positive role in moving forward our agenda in this first half of the year. Other questions on this or on health-related matters, and I have Sander. Jack, you have a follow-up, sorry. I seem to have missed it.
Hello. Sorry. My question is, what is the criteria for an essential meeting then? When you get invited to other meetings, what decides whether it's an essential meeting or a non-essential meeting?
Thank you. It's a decision which the Commission is allowed to take on a case-by-case basis. There are no formal criteria set out for this. The international institutions present in Belgium are allowed to decide what they consider to be the essential business that they need to carry out in person. And therefore, the college assesses this based on the individual circumstances of the meeting that is supposed to take place. And again, it was felt that having one-on-one discussions in Portugal was, in the current circumstances, essential. So we move on to the next question. Sander.
I messed up my audio settings, so I hope you can hear me. Seems you do. To push you a little bit further on this point, because you gave a formalistic response, we can do certain things and we assess if we stay within those limits. Now, you can also imagine that as a EU institution, you fulfill the role of a role model. So to all those businesses that think, okay, my travel is essential as well, and I can have dinner if I want to as well. Is this the right signal you send, especially since you have seen a rise of COVID infections in the Brussels city of Etterbeek of close to 100% after Christmas holidays? So what is the public signal you send by sticking to this formalistic line?
I don't think at all it is a formalistic line. I think that it is a decision which was taken based on the circumstances, the political circumstances that we are in. The management of public policies in Europe is a very specific business. And once again, these are not decisions which are taken lightly. And let me remind you that almost all of the Commission's business is currently taking place online. Almost all of it. There are very limited exceptions, and they are of a very political nature. And this is the nature of the business that the college had to carry out in Portugal. So yes, the message which is being sent to citizens is that the European Commission tries as much as it can to carry out its business, and so do we here, for example, in the press room, virtually. There are very limited exceptions when it is our assessment that there are clear political advantages in order to implement the policies that that we are designing and implementing to meet in person. And this is what led us to carry out this one-day mission to Portugal at the invitation, let me remind you, of the Portuguese authorities. Rita.
Thanks, Eric. It's not about the trip to Lisbon. It's about comments that the president made ahead of the trip and also in Lisbon regarding this idea of the vaccination passport. The president mentioned that there would be a political debate and also a legal debate. So my question is, does the Commission have any sort of legal assessment of this proposal? And if so, can we know what it says? Thanks.
Thank you, Rita. I think she meant that there were legal rights that were being mentioned potentially as existing for those who would have such a passport or not, and that it was extremely important to determine what would be the potential rights or not of people, and that this was a very delicate debate that needed to be had, and that indeed an occasion to discuss this would come during the meeting of the heads of state and government that would take place on Thursday here by VTC. Tommaso.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for the floor. It's just two questions on vaccines, if I may. The first one is because I've read that Bayer is in talks with the CureVac to join forces to produce the upcoming vaccine against COVID-19. And there is a trend I see in the European industry to join forces to build up the production capacity which is necessary to increase the production of vaccines. I wonder if the European Commission is applying some sort of pressure on the private industry to accelerate this trend, which might be helpful to overcome the current predicament. And the second one is on the contracts. I know they're covered by commercial secrets, the confidentiality, and so on. But I just wonder if you can tell us if they foresee the possibility for the member states to impose fines or some kind of penalization for companies which do not respect the calendar, the schedule of the deliveries of the vaccines. Thank you.
Thank you. Stefan.
Thank you very much, Thomas. On your first question regarding the talks between Bayer and CureVac, of course, we're not going to pronounce ourselves on steps that are taken by private companies in this or in that sense. The only thing which I would like to stress is that it's important that in the European Union, we ensure a good production capacity of the vaccines. You know that production capacity is one of the main challenges that we have to face to have a quick production of the many vaccines that we need, and initiatives that help to ensure more production capacity are, of course, more than welcome. With regard to the contract, I will not go into details of what contracts say or not with regard to late or not late deliveries. We have contracts with several types of clauses. Contracts. One of these contracts, in particular, the CureVac contract, has been made available in a reading room for members of the European Parliament. But I will not go into the question as to which type of clauses we have in the different contracts. Thank you.
Stefan, if I can ask you to switch off your mobile phone, thanks, or to put it on mute. Oliver, another question on vaccines.
Hi.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes. You're back on stream.
Hi, I don't know. I'm not sure you see me, but anyway, David's question on the dinner, I think, is still open. Whether that was a good idea, and whether the commissioners could simply have, or the members of the commission could have simply said, no, we don't want to join there because it's not safe. And related to the whole vaccination passport debate. Can you give us an update where we are with the passenger locator form? I asked about this 2 weeks ago and got the reply that basically there's no major progress so far. But if you want to have a serious debate about a vaccination certificate, you will at least have to figure out the passenger locator form, because you need databases of people who are moving across borders, and these databases need to be able to talk with each other and so forth. So where are we with the PLF, as it is called in Brussels jargon? Thank you.
Thank you very much. On the dinner, I think that I answered this in the context of my general response on the necessity to have discussions with the Portuguese ministers on how to move forward on the Portuguese presidency agenda. Those dinners were part of that meeting, and therefore they took place in that context. On your question related to PLF, I pass the floor to Stefan.
Yes, hello. Thank you for this question, and thank you, Oliver, to remind us of this important file of the passenger locator form. What I can tell you is that the European Aviation Safety Agency has been working with several member states to develop indeed a technical platform for this passenger locator form. This platform is ready to be used, and it's now up to the member states to make sure that the necessary legal documents are in place, which allow the member states to share data with them. But the work has been done by the European Aviation Safety Agency, and so now member states have to do the necessary steps to be connected and allow sharing of data. Thank you.
Thank you. Athanasios, you have your hand raised, so a question on vaccines, I presume.
That's right. Thank you. I'll get back to this vaccination certificate. And I was wondering if the Greek side did provide any scientific evidence that those who are vaccinated cannot transmit the virus, because the whole purpose of taking precautionary measures of travel is to avoid people getting contaminated. So did they provide any such scientific data, or do you have other sources that with complete certainty tell you that those who are vaccinated cannot transmit the virus? Thanks.
Stefan.
Yes, thank you. There is not yet, it's not yet known to what extent people that have been vaccinated properly can no longer transmit the disease. So we have to be very careful here. This being said, I believe this is a question that has to be checked by our colleagues from the European Medicines Agency, which is following these issues from a very medical scientific point of view, of course. Thank you.
Thank you, Stéphane. David, une question sur les vaccins.
Oui, merci. Très bref follow-up sur la question du Passenger Locator Form. Est-ce que cette plateforme est valide aussi pour les voyages en voiture et en train, parce qu'on n'a pas seulement les avions. Et donc les gens... Peut-être que, certains pays demandent un passenger locator form aussi pour les gens qui voyagent avec d'autres moyens de transport. Deuxième question sur les vaccins, c'est à propos des documents de l'EMA. Il y en a certains qui ont été publiés par Le Monde. Je voulais savoir si vous avez des commentaires par rapport au fait qu'il y a des emails dans lesquels la Commission fait des pressions sur l'EMA pour avoir une approbation rapide du vaccin Pfizer-BioNTech. Merci.
Merci David. Je passe la parole à Stéphane.
Merci David. Je vais d'abord peut-être répondre à ta deuxième question concernant EMA et puis sur le Passenger Locator Form. Vendredi dernier, nous avons eu l'opportunité de nous exprimer quant à ces documents de l'EMA. Premièrement, je tiens quand même à souligner que l'EMA a indiqué dans son communiqué de presse qu'il faut faire attention avec les documents qui ont été soi-disant leaked, étant donné que ces documents ont fait l'objet de manipulation. Donc, il faut faire attention avec ce type de documents. Deuxièmement, ce que nous avons souligné la semaine dernière aussi, c'est que la Commission n'a jamais exercé une pression politique sur EMA concernant l'évaluation de l'efficacité et la sûreté du vaccin. La Commission a toujours souligné que rapidité, c'est important. Nous devons réagir à cette pandémie, mais cette rapidité ne peut jamais avoir lieu au détriment de la sûreté et de l'efficacité du vaccin. Et c'est pourquoi nous avons toujours insisté sur l'importance d'avoir notre agence, une agence indépendante, de prendre le temps nécessaire pour évaluer l'efficacité, la qualité et la sûreté de ce vaccin. Il est vrai qu'il y a eu des contacts entre la Commission et l'EMA. Évidemment, nous sommes dans des circonstances exceptionnelles, mais ces contacts ont eu lieu surtout sur les aspects procéduriels. Qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire pour accélérer la procédure, mais uniquement d'un point de vue administratif, je dirais. Jamais sur ces discussions ont eu lieu sur accélérer l'évaluation même de ces critères fondamentaux d'effectivité et de sûreté. Et ces discussions n'ont jamais mis en cause l'indépendance de l'agence. C'est la première chose. En ce qui concerne le Passenger Locator Form, qui a été établi par l'Agence européenne de la sécurité d'aviation, à ma connaissance, c'est un PLF ou un Passenger Locator Form qui s'applique à l'aviation, justement, ce qui explique l'intervention ou le travail qui a été fait par le EASA. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Je ne vois plus d'autres questions sur le sujet santé pour Stéphane ou moi. Nous allons donc passer à d'autres sujets et je passe la parole à Momchil.
Hi, good afternoon. My question is related to the arrest of Alexei Navalny. And is there any sign that the High Representative will propose sanctions to include some persons in the recently adopted new sanction regime in connection with the arrest of Mr. Navalny yesterday? Thank you.
Peter.
Hi, Momchil. Thank you. Maybe first, allow me to recall that there was a strong European condemnation of the arrest of Mr. Navalny when he came back to Moscow yesterday. The representatives of the EU, the President of the Commission, the President of the European Council, the High Representative were very clear that we are calling for immediate release of Mr. Navalny and that the politicization of the judiciary and detention of political opponents is unacceptable and it goes contrary to Russia's international obligations. So this really needs to stop, and we also call upon Russian authorities to release from detention also the number of journalists and people who came to the airport to show their support for Mr. Navalny. On your question, apart from the reactions you have seen in the public, you can assume that there is a lot of discussions currently among the member states how to follow up on these very unfortunate events. And I can only say that the process of invoking or suggesting and drafting the sanctions and the restrictive measures is, of course, a confidential process that is not conducted in the public. So once a decision has been made and the decision adopted, you know that it requires unanimous agreement of the member state, then it's communicated in an appropriate way. At this stage, the discussions are ongoing among the member states about what would be the best and most efficient follow-up to these very unfortunate events.
Thank you. Other questions on this case for Peter? Catherine, is it on this slide?
Yes, it is, Eric. Thank you very much. So, Peter, you say that you can't really openly discuss, who you might be considering for that list. But Alexei Navalny was very, very clear when he addressed the European Parliament recently. And he said there was no point in sanctioning certain people. You had to sanction Putin's inner circle. And you had to follow the money. And he mentioned some people, Usmanov, Württemberg, Abramovich, the people who have gained from this particular regime. And And I'm just wondering, given that he is the victim that that the sanctions would be directed at helping, I mean, shouldn't you listen to his counsel on this and target the money?
Well, maybe I would touch upon first on one aspect which you mentioned, and that's the fact that Mr. Navalny is a Russian citizen who was poisoned on Russian soil. There was an attempt to kill him on a Russian soil with a prohibited chemical agent. This is very serious, and that's why we are expecting from the Russian authorities really to investigate this fully in a transparent way and cooperate also fully with the Organization for Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, the OPCW, because it's very important to investigate this. In this connection, we really expect and call upon Russian authorities to protect and respect the rights of Mr. Navalny as a Russian citizen. And when it comes to sanctions, of course, the member states take into account a lot of input that is coming when they are suggesting and discussing the procedure, whom or which subjects or which entities and which individuals to put on the sanctions list. So they take into account everything at their disposal to prepare the sanctions list in the way that it has a sound legal basis, because this is a clear legal act and needs to be justified based on legal grounds. And they proceed then based on the best knowledge or best state of the information they have when they do the listings. But again, this is a process that takes place in confidentiality, and there's no point in trying to discuss the partial elements of this process in the public.
Catherine, you have a follow-up.
Yes, Eric. You say that the Russian authorities should investigate this, but as Navalny also pointed out to the European Parliament, the EU should be treating the current Russian government as criminals who have temporarily taken over power. And we know that these killings using Novichok go well beyond Russian territory. We've seen it in Salisbury. Can we trust these authorities? And also the different investigations by Bellingcat would suggest that the state itself is very, very much involved in these murders.
Yes, Catherine. The position of the European Union when it comes to Russia and how we consider the official representatives of the Russian Federation has been captured and discussed many times, most recently in October last year at the FAC, where the ministers have underlined and reinforced that there are 5 guiding principles of the EU-Russia relations currently. These guiding principles have been defined back in 2016. They haven't changed. It's a complex relationship. Mr. Navalny is an important part of that relationship, but the High Representative Borrell was also very clear at the press conference after that FAC in October that the EU-Russia relations cannot be reduced only on the question of Mr. Navalny. Remember that we have also the situation in Ukraine, that we have to deal with Russia when it comes to the full implementation of the Minsk Accords. So this is all, again, taken into account by the member states whose policies and positions are being formed jointly in thorough discussions, and the result of these discussions is the position of the EU towards the current Russian administration captured in the 5 guiding principles.
Thank you. Are there other questions on foreign relations for Peter today? Noureddine. Oh, sorry. Nicolas, une question sur les relations extérieures.
Je voulais savoir si les dernières évolutions avec la Turquie étaient pour vous un bon pas dans la bonne direction, et si on avait atteint, je dirais, si on sortait un peu du marasme avec les relations turques, parce qu'on voit que, je pense que les ambassadeurs de l'UE ont été reçus la semaine dernière, le ministre allemand, et je pense à Ankara aujourd'hui, on voit qu'il y a des pas, un ton différent à Ankara. Est-ce que c'est quelque chose que vous percevez, ou est-ce que vous n'êtes pas encore tout à fait convaincu de la bonne volonté turque?
Peter, I think you can repeat what you said on Friday.
Exactement. Je pourrais seulement répéter que nous avons discuté la semaine dernière sur ces sujets. Donc, pour être bref, nous sommes très conscients sur la nécessité d'améliorer les relations entre l'Union européenne et la Turquie. Nous sommes en train d'avoir une visite des ministres des Affaires étrangères turcs à Bruxelles ce jeudi, 21 janvier. Donc, on discute et nous attendons que nous allons finalement avancer dans la direction d'un dialogue constructif et coopération positive avec la Turquie.
Merci. Noureddine.
J'ai à peu près la même question, si tu permets.
Vas-y.
Bonjour Eric. Je voudrais poser la question, c'est à peu près la même question que mon ami Nicolas. Est-ce que la présidente von der Leyen et le président Michel vont ensemble visiter la Turquie avant la fin du mois? Et est-ce que quand on rassemble tout ça, la réunion du ministre allemand aujourd'hui, la réunion de Josep Borrell et Çavuşoğlu le jeudi, puis la rencontre avec la Grèce, entre les Grecs et les Turcs le lundi prochain, est-ce que petit à petit, les deux parties, l'Union européenne et la Turquie, sont dans le processus de tourner la page des tensions des derniers mois? Je te remercie.
Avant de passer la parole à Peter, juste pour confirmer encore une fois que je n'ai pas d'annonce à faire sur une visite de la présidente von der Leyen en Turquie pour le moment. Peter.
Et pour ajouter, mais une autre fois, je peux seulement répéter que surtout les déclarations et intentions, le signal de possibles développements positifs, ce qui est très important pour nous, pour l'Union européenne et les pays membres de l'Union européenne, voir la mise en œuvre de cette intention et déclaration en pratique, en œuvre. Donc, ça veut dire la mise en œuvre des intentions de faire le développement positif, le dialogue et la coopération avec tous les pays membres de l'Union européenne. Donc, les déclarations sont bonnes, mais qui est mieux sont les concrets faits et actions.
Y a-t-il d'autres questions pour Peter? Hans-Uwe, question on foreign affairs?
Yes, please, if I may. Good morning, everybody. My question concerns the relationship to UK in the domain of defense and security policy. Are there any intentions? Have we milestones? Have we an agenda how to proceed? That is my question. Thank you very much.
Well, maybe at this stage I would stick only to a very short indication that this is a subject of forthcoming discussions among the EU member states and the foreign ministers. So stay tuned, and there will be soon answers, more concrete answers also to these kind of questions.
Joe, a question on foreign relations. Joe, you have.
Sorry, Eric, it was about the UK. So I can ask now or I can wait.
Well, I'm afraid to say, Joe, that the UK is now foreign relations. So you can go ahead. We just had a question on the UK.
In his group interview the other day, mentioned remaining vigilant.
Sorry, Joe, can you start? Because we missed the beginning of your question.
No worries. Am I back?
Yes.
Yes. So Michel Barnier, in his interview with a group of European newspapers and publications, mentioned the need to be vigilant about the change in British standards going forward in relation to the TCA. So recently we've seen Britain reintroduce on an emergency basis a ban pesticides. We have talk of a Singapore on Thames, a Singapore of Europe, free ports, and a kind of getting rid of EU law out of the British statute book. So I just wanted to know, how are you remaining vigilant at the moment when the Partnership Council isn't in kind of full running? Have we got any updates on the Partnership Council? And who at the moment is looking after, watching over Britain, and what Boris Johnson's government is doing in terms of changing regulations that could one day infect the level playing field? Thank you.
Thanks. Joe, well, you mentioned a lot of different things, but they are all, you said yourself, there's talk of, so these are not at all concrete decisions which have been taken by the United Kingdom. And as you know, first of all, we never comment on these things inside the European Union. We're definitely not going to do it for a country that is outside of the European Union. And as you know, the agreement that we have signed with the United Kingdom foresees that we will look at the impact of these decisions on the level playing field. This is what counts. And therefore, we are not at all at a stage where any of this talk can be seen as having an influence on the implementation of the agreement that we have signed with the United Kingdom. On the Partnership Council, however, I will ask Dan to come back to you bilaterally on this, because I do not have yet the specific details. Any other questions for us on foreign affairs? That does not seem to be the case. I open the floor to other questions. I see no other hands raised for us today. We are extremely disciplined. 1 hour. Hans-Uwe, you're breaking the discipline of the 1 hour midday briefing, but go ahead. Another issue.
Sorry for that, Eric. Sorry, extremely sorry. Maybe I missed the point, and then please accept my apologies. We had last week a seminar of the college. Is there anything what you can deliver, what we can get as an information of the outcome? The day before, you mentioned there are 3 main subjects: the presidency, Team Europe, and the delivery of the Green Deal. So is there anything to expect from it? But maybe I missed the point, and then please accept my apologies. And my last question would be concerning competition, and it is the never-ending deal between Fincantieri and Chantier de l'Atlantique. En France, what is now the proceeding? What is the procedure? What is the proceeding? I learned in French media that they have extended now until the end of January. What is the the Commission's position on that? Thank you very much, and apologies.
No need to apologize, Hans-Uwe. Very legitimate question in any case. I mean, on the college seminar, college seminars are occasions for opportunities for the members of the college, once again, to carry out political discussions on the important files that are on the college's table. And indeed, the college seminar had the honor of receiving the President of the European Parliament, Mr. Sassoli, to discuss with him both the extraordinary year that has just finished and all the work that has been done in very, very close partnership with the European Parliament in order to get through a very impressive number of files, and secondly, to look ahead at the challenges for the year to come. On the 2 other files, I cannot obviously go into the details of what the college discussed, but indeed, the President felt that it was important at this point in time to focus on the one hand on the external dimension of the EU's action. You know as well as I do that there are many, many close links on what we do in terms of external policies and our internal policies. And secondly, on the European Green Deal, it has been extremely important for this college to stay focused on the design, definition, and now implementation of the European Green Deal. In fact, it is the college's conviction that the European Green Deal must be a central element in the response to the crisis. And furthermore, 2021 is going to be an extremely important year when it comes out to the rollout of the European Green Deal, since, as you know, we have a whole series of proposals that will be forthcoming in the first half of the year in order to implement the Fit for 55 So the reduction by 2030 by 55% of greenhouse gas emissions. We also have other events to keep in mind, such as the biodiversity conference, which will be coming up. So for all these reasons, it was felt important for the college to discuss these files. On your question on Fincantieri, I pass the floor to Arianna.
Hello, I hope you can see me and hear me. Thanks for the question. I take the occasion to recall a bit where we stand on the case and what has happened on this case in the past. So on 30th October 2019, the Commission has opened an in-depth investigation into the proposed acquisition of Chantiers de l'Atlantique by Fincantieri. At that time, we had raised serious doubts about the compatibility of the proposed transaction with the global market for the construction of large cruise ships, because this would have brought to the removal of Chantiers de l'Atlantique as an important competitive force in the market. It's already a very concentrated market, which is characterized by very high barriers to entry. And therefore, considering that Chantiers de l'Atlantique and Fincantieri are both global leaders in this market, their combination could have brought to a risk of higher prices for customers and for consumers, less choice, and reduced incentives to innovation. On 13th March 2020, so last year, the in-depth investigation into the effects of this transaction has been suspended. This is due to the fact that the parties have failed to provide in a timely manner important information that the Commission needed for the assessment of the transaction and that we had requested from them. This missing information is essential for us to really analyze the impact of the transaction on the market and to ensure that it doesn't lead to effective competition, as I was mentioning, and so it does not bring to a detriment for customers and consumers. Let me be clear. To this date, the parties have not submitted the requested information. Therefore, the investigation remains suspended. Once the missing information will have been provided from the parties, the merger review will restart, our procedure will restart, and the deadline for our assessment will be adjusted accordingly. Throughout the process, in line with standard procedures, the parties were given the opportunity to respond to our concerns. And as of today, the parties did not submit some remedies to address the Commission's concerns, neither during the preliminary investigation phase nor by the statutory deadline of the in-depth investigation phase. So no remedies submitted. I hope this provides a bit a screenshot of the situation.
Thank you very much, Arianna. I think we're all going to know this case absolutely by heart in the coming weeks, in view of the excellent information you provide on the state of play of the file, which is not moving forward. Okay, I see no other hands raised for us today. So remember, tomorrow, college readout, we will specify subsequently the subject of the press conference that follows straight from the college readout, and then we will take up the midday briefing again on Wednesday. Thank you very much. Bon appétit.